great when every engineer and tech and host.
More and more these days, it's the case.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Beth. Welcome to our little internet broadcast.
Great, thanks for having me.
So this is Beth Martens, a wonderful human being and someone who's a yoga teacher and a Kirtan musician. As well, you offer programs for rejuvenating caregivers. So let's talk. Tell us about yourself.
Sure. Yeah, I got introduced to the yogic arts in the early 90s. I was in university studying a degree in anthropology. And a fellow came to the university and offered a course in meditation. Kevin Harmer, to this day, he's still a good friend and teacher to me.
Right.
And so I really quickly, I'd already had a lifelong interest in the spiritual arts in one way or the other, but never had any formal training. And that began my daily practice of meditation. And out of that practice grew a whole creative life that again was there in seed form and the desire of it, but nothing ever really came of it. And so I would go I made a trip to India every single year. I was there for a few months, 6 months, 9 months. And I literally just worked in order to get back to India. That was kind of my goal. I ended up getting involved with my family's business at the time, so I had this almost parallel life where we were I was a vice president executive of a company where we did a lot of really formal and high stakes, high pressure, awful experience, actually, like valuable but awful on the other hand. Right, stress for no good reason. That's like poison, right?
Right.
And but this trip to India every year was pulling me so powerfully into another way of being, another way of thinking, and it got to the point where those two fields competed powerfully enough that I got sick.
Oh.
I wasn't able, you know what I mean? I wasn't able to walk away from a family business. Thought this was my livelihood, my life was connected to it, and what could I really felt no choice, which, I'm here to tell you, you have a choice. There's always a choice, right?
Right.
So you don't have to go to the brink of disaster. And I was diagnosed in 1998 and 99. I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease, cancer of the lymphoma system.
Right.
So it's really serious.
I'm very familiar with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And I can also relate.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
In many ways with what you've been leading up to in terms of what you said. And so when that happened, what did you do when you were diagnosed with lymphoma?
I used it as my reason to walk away from everything that was keeping my life force down at that point. So I gave myself permission to walk away from my job and to start exploring healing arts in a really, I have to say, aggressive way. Really seriously interested way. By the time I was diagnosed, I was already stage 4 lymphoma, so things were pretty intense. I had a really strong academic interest in natural medicine,
right?
And that's something that it was really interesting to test in real life, because there are so many things that it all sounds so beautiful in theory. Yeah. And then you try to apply it to real life, and you go, okay, there's something going on here that's not what you can just think your way through.
Exactly.
Anymore, right?
Well, I mean, it's exactly when your body is breaking down and you're faced with the reality of that every moment.
That's right. Yeah. Theory's out the window.
Yeah.
Right?
The romantic aspect of it flies away. And so what happened? And what did you do? I mean, you've apparently
recovered. True enough. It was a 3-year stint and a second diagnosis. I went down one second time. Amazingly enough, whatever you're trying to avoid the most, you're going to draw right into you. That's right. So I really feared being sick. There I was sick. I really feared dying. Here I was facing my death. I had a huge fear of Western medical science. For whatever reason, right? That's just and Western medical authority. Those two things turned out to be like huge discoveries for me to see the amount of fear that I faced with that.
Uh-huh.
And then, so I tried really desperately to avoid Western medicine beyond the diagnosis stage.
Right.
And I engaged with all kinds of natural medicine. I moved to Vancouver to work with a naturopath there who had expertise in this. Excuse me. And I had some success, but because our world is not geared for the expenses associated, there's no support, there's no insurance, there's nothing, right?
Yes.
So I went into major debt. I ended up selling my house to try to cover some of that, and I still didn't get better. I was sustaining, I was holding, but not getting better.
Is there some water?
Sure, please. Yeah, I apologize.
Yeah, no.
You got me in the morning here.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and so when I hit that kind of sustaining point and just like literally maintaining my disease rather than my health.
And this was through the therapies, etc. That
all the natural therapies that I was doing in Vancouver.
Okay.
Then it was time to go, and it was actually the naturopath that said, "Okay, now go do chemotherapy," or now go. In his opinion, it was radiation. But it turned into 11 months chemotherapy. That's what I went through the first time, and it, like just like a truck, all of the worst possible imagination I could have about my life, and there it was right in front of me.
Wow.
I think it's so meant to be that we go through those experiences, because the soul is sitting there waiting to know about its own resilience, about its own power, its own depth, and even right down to the level of the spirit being completely untouchable, even through death, right? So
this is something that you actually had to practically learn?
I had to practically learn. I was technically on my deathbed as far as I was concerned. There came a point where I didn't know. I had no good prognosis of any kind. I had been through, maybe 9-10 months of chemo at this point. I was completely out. If there was one day, 24 hours, I did nothing but lay there. I was pretty certain that something was over, and
right.
To put it dramatically, I died to something that day. But in the process of fully, completely allowing that death to happen at the level of my spirit, so to speak,
right?
All your beliefs, all of this, like, I can get through this if I just power through it, and this is a challenge, and all that kind of actually ego speak is where that is originating.
Yeah.
And I surrendered, I broke down, I let go, and in that moment I saw myself without any of the add-ons we think to be ourself.
Okay.
Like all of the qualities, all of our abilities. I'd given up my job, I lost my house, I lost you name it, like even a lot of friends disappeared at this stage of my life.
Yeah, well, death seems to be something that doesn't attract many people.
It's not an attraction. It's not an attraction. No, exactly. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and so here you are,
but
face to face.
Here I was face to face with my own self, and the discovery was amazing to me, because really myself was fully effulgent, fully, completely present and alive.
Surprise.
And yeah, exactly. Like seeing through to this incredible force of life that didn't depend on anything.
Wow.
Right? And I just couldn't have seen that otherwise. Or maybe I could have.
Well, conceivably, when you're talking about the circumstances before that, being in a situation you really didn't necessarily wish to be in, and that stress from being involved with business and life and all that, I don't know how one could have seen that. It would have been too distracting, right? Yeah,
this was the path that I took, so I'll say that I had to take it. But I'll also add...
Not recommended.
Not recommended, exactly.
Necessarily. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah, you got it.
Right.
Yeah,
so after 11 months of chemo, right? You had this realization, and so after that, what took place for you?
I struggled like crazy. I struggled for another 18 months to try to recover from the chemo, and that was a deep spiritual work. Having had some openings, then it was time to go to work on them, because it's one thing to have a vision and a realization, but then to integrate it and really get into the depths of where all of our life energy is tied up. The next stage for me that actually led to a second diagnosis was to realize that a lot of the actions I was putting out for the sake of my health were coming out of all these fears that I mentioned. And it wasn't until after the second diagnosis, after another big round of chemo, and then walking away from what was recommended to me, a bone marrow transplant at that point, I did the deepest soul searching I'd ever done in my life at that point. Discovered that so much fear had been motivating me, and I thought my only chance for soul survival, not body survival. At this point, I'm not even working for body survival anymore. It's just like, okay, my soul might die in this process. That was the realization that I came to. So what...
Before you go on, that's very interesting. That what you call the soul, your soul would die. Explain a little bit of that, if you can.
Yeah, I won't pretend to be able to uncover the mystery by any means, but I did see that the more damage that I underwent to the soul, and that would include like physical suffering, deprivations, separations, all those kind of experiences, can, for me, from my perspective, definitely damage the soul, right?
In terms of, like, are you talking about just programs that are negative that kind of get imprinted into you?
Yeah, in all our negative experiences, like when somebody dies from you, there's damage to the soul. Now that's not necessarily a bad thing, because the soul can heal. We can integrate those experiences. We will become powerful for other people who face losses, is the potential for it. But notice how some people will experience huge losses and they go into bitterness and they never make it to grief. They just get hardened, and they will very slowly, and I think the soul can die long before the life in the body will pass. I think I sadly witnessed that in my own grandmother. Right? She was very alive, vibrant, creative, had a lot of huge aspirations and abilities, and there came a point where her body would not allow her to do anything anymore. I think the soul died at that point, because those were all the soul nourishing things, or it did that slow so by the time by the time her body passed, her soul was so, I don't know, Dad, I don't know, like, if I can't speak with authority on that, but I saw a total change, right?
Yeah, a sort of a slide.
Exactly. So too much suffering in the life of a human being, I think, does cost us our soul.
Well, we get discouraged.
Exactly. And and the ability to pull yourself out becomes this monumental effort to retrieve your soul, right? That expression that North American shamanism would use, to go and retrieve the soul from death.
To revitalize your essence, is that it? So, to live.
There's again. Something there. Yeah, to live again. Like, life is eternal. Life goes on and on. That part I saw. Right? And then there's our individual souls that seem to have this, right? It's what makes you do all of this. It's what makes me engaged with my projects, right? So
there was a long climb.
Yeah, a fast, long climb.
A fast, long climb?
A fast, long climb. I didn't have much time to decide, right?
Right.
And so in the face of discovering this about my soul, I chose the path of least damage, of least harm to my soul.
But the most effort, it would seem.
Not necessarily the case, but I know what you're saying. Yeah, the hardest, for sure, the hardest. When you said uphill, definitely, because in the process I chose against this huge bone marrow transplant. It would have taken a year at least to recover. I know somebody who just went through it. Very brutal. And so I thought, if this is my time to die now, I want to die in some peace. Not under the ravages of intense chemotherapy and this huge hospitalization and isolation and all that kind of thing. So I just really came to peace with the fact that I will die, And it's not just like, if I'm going to die. No, I'm going to die.
Exactly.
Right?